Welcome to another episode of the Project Egg Show. I'm your host, Ben Gothard, and today we have the honor of speaking with Leemon Baird. How you doing today, Leemon?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I am wonderful and so excited to chat with you today because I really want to know, what is your story?
Hmm. Well, that's not at all a broad question.
Yes.
So I am happy to tell you whatever you want to know. You want to know how I got into this, or what I do in life, or what's going on right now? What would you like to hear?
I would love to hear from the very beginning of your life until now, that entire
Sure,
story.
sure. Okay. Um, so I have a loving home, had two parents and three siblings, and moved around a lot as I was growing up. Then I went to college at the Air Force Academy and was in uniform for 24 years, and eventually retired from the Air Force. Got to do a lot of fun stuff. Never was overseas, never really did Air Force things. But I got to go to school and be a professor and a research scientist and that kind of thing, which is just a lot of fun. Yeah, it was fun being a professor. I always enjoyed teaching. That's always been fun. And then research is fun. I've always liked to understand things and to invent things. And so I got to do that for many years, which was a lot of fun. I also, at the same time, kept starting companies. And so I was doing that as well, and had several of those. Started a company that got acquired by a Fortune 500 company. And then I started one that was acquired by private equity. And then I started one called Swirlds that is still running, and it did private ledgers. And then I started one called Hedera that does public ledgers. And those two are running right now. And I'm running both of those right now. And so it's been kind of a wild ride. I've gotten to do research in a lot of different areas, and I've gotten to do companies that are somewhat unrelated to each other. And I don't know, lots of fun stuff.
So, first of all, thank you very much for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Um, and I really want to kind of dive back into what prompted you to go into the Air Force. What was the impetus there?
Well, I had known people that were in the Air Force, and it seemed like a good thing. It seemed like I would be able to go to the Air Force Academy and get a good education. And then, if it didn't work out, I could leave after 5 years. But my siblings did that, but I stayed in for a 20-year retirement. But I was able to do things where I was using my skills in ways that are important, and I was able to teach people, and I was able to do research on stuff, and yeah, it turned out to be a pretty good life, I thought.
And I think as entrepreneurs, it's super important to be self-aware and to really understand like what our skills actually are, what we're good at, what we're not good at. So how did you discover what you were good at and position yourself to be able to deploy those skills?
It's an interesting question. From early childhood, I have been interested in understanding things and inventing things. And from early childhood, I've been interested in teaching other people about the stuff that I found. And so I guess teacher and researcher has just kind of been in my DNA my whole life. And I have kind of been a risk taker in a lot of ways, and entrepreneurial kind of in various ways. So, boy, as far as I can remember sitting in elementary school in fourth grade thinking about how I would teach this stuff to someone else. And I can remember even as a very small child trying to think about how the world worked and how you could invent things that would take care of that or take advantage of that to work in interesting ways. And I've always just been a voracious reader and just loved to learn about things. So I don't know. I guess I was warped from the beginning.
So it seems like from a really, really early age, you've been in touch with this love of learning and teaching and reading.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know. I've been reading since, I don't know, first grade or so on, just reading all the time, and trying to create things. Always wanted to create things. Always wanted to design things that were cool and intricate and complex. And computer science was the right area to get into. But I think I could have enjoyed a lot of different other fields too. But just computer science is amazing, because if you can imagine something in enough detail, you have now created it. It's the only field where that's true. If you design a bridge in great detail, all you have is a blueprint of a bridge. But in computer science, if you design a program in so much detail, you've written all the lines of it, now you have a program. You actually have a thing just by thinking of it. It's kind of magic, actually. So that was fun. And I started that at an early age too, was all the computer stuff. I've always been interested in this sort of thing.
That's amazing. The idea of being able to take what's in your mind, something you're thinking of, just these ethereal fragments of thought, and to be able to articulate them in code, and then bam, like something is real out of that. That is amazing.
Crazy. It is crazy. Yes. Yeah. It's very much magic. You're able to create things that are real just by imagining them in enough detail. I guess authors have a similar thing, but what they create is novels that stir people's minds and souls. What I create are things that can actually go out and do stuff on their own. That's just mind-boggling. Hard to imagine.
So when you were in the Air Force and you were teaching and you were really bringing this computer science, learning, teaching, reading, all these things seem to kind of be mingling and growing together. How did you then decide to move into the entrepreneurial world? And what was that transition like from professor to entrepreneur, businessman?
Oh, I've always been interested in that sort of thing. So I want to create things that are cool, but I want everyone to use them. And if you just put it on a shelf, what good is that? You just publish a paper and then it sits on a shelf, and that's just boring. So I've always wanted to do this sort of thing. I had a friend, Mance Harmon. So we met way back in 93 or so. And we have been working together ever since. We did research together for a long time, published a bunch of papers together on machine learning, artificial intelligence, neural networks, all that stuff. And then we just kind of natural, we started building companies. And so, we built the two that were acquired and the two that we're running now. And there were others that we always talked about. We were always talking about ways of building companies to do these things. And so it was just a natural fit. If you want to be able to create new things, it doesn't do any good unless people actually use the new things. And so just you naturally want to be an entrepreneur to go out and change the world and get people to use your stuff.
What were some of the things that you were researching, and what were some of the more I don't know if interesting is the right word, but like the most impactful things that you discovered?
So here's an interesting one. I was about to say what's the most interesting, which maybe isn't always the most impactful. I've done some really cool research that's totally useless. Well, here's one before my current stuff. I mean, I think Hashgraph actually was the most impactful thing I've done. But before I did that stuff, I looked at the math just because I like interesting math problems. I'm just attracted to that. The math of how could you build radios that would talk to each other and be really hard to jam? And people know a million ways of doing that. And they all involve having a secret. Your radio and my radio have to have some secret in them, and then they use that secret to talk to each other in a way that the bad guys can't jam. Could you do it without a secret? And I worked on that for a long time, and I had people tell me, well, no, they can't do that. You have to have something that's a secret. And then eventually figured out, oh yeah, there is a way to do it, and it works beautifully. And there's math proofs about it, and we had PhD student got his PhD in it, and we have published lots of papers on it, and people are using it. And I was just talking to some people recently that are interested in it, but it was just kind of cool. The whole idea was you'd like to have a bunch of radios that can talk to each other. It's hard to jam. You don't have any secrets. If one of the radios is lost and the bad guys look inside of it to find its secrets, well, there are no secrets. So, that was kind of fun. And the math of it is really fascinating. Some of the theorems I proved about it are really interesting, and I have some open problems. If anyone likes math puzzles, there's a really cool graph coloring puzzle that comes out of it that I still haven't solved. I just like to work on math problems, and I still work on it sometimes. But anybody wants to know a really cool math problem, to ask me about the coloring problem related to jam resistance. It's fascinating.
How do we find it? Where do you go to check it out?
I guess you email me. I never published it. I never solved it. You can't publish it if you don't have a solution. But you can check out, if you wanted to check out the publications they did on the jam resistance, you can do that. Just go to Leemon.com and you can see all my papers.
So why is it unsolvable, or is it just that you're devoting your time and energies elsewhere and you haven't devoted the time to solve it?
Maybe the latter. So I don't know, for some reason, certain math problems just kind of grab onto me, and I just keep working on them for years, and I'll put them aside, and then a year or two later, they'll come back and haunt me again, and I'll just keep working on them for years and years. And one of those was I wanted to be able to do, collaboration in a way that would have the rules enforced. And I kept convincing myself it was impossible, and eventually solved that one. That was the Hashgraph. And when I solved that one, I realized I need to not put any time in anything else for a while. I really need to put some time into this one. And so that's what I've been putting all my time into. But even now, I'll go home and I'll think about math problems that have nothing to do with Hedera or swirls, just because that's the way I'm wired. It's just fun.
So can you talk about some of the problems that you are working on right now?
So with swirls, with Hadera, what I'm working on is we have a public ledger. It's a bunch of computers that talk to each other and come to an agreement. And we have the basic algorithm and it's running. But there's a million little things we want to add on to it. And for each little thing, you have to decide, well, what is the best way of doing it? And so, I'm constantly working out, making new algorithms to make these little pieces work as well as possible. They aren't the big thing, but there are lots of these little things, which is really fun. Trying to figure out how do you make it exactly as efficient as possible and as secure as possible and as fast as possible and all that stuff. So I'm constantly doing that right now. Plus, it's just, it's a big company and I'm constantly dealing with people and with meetings and with trying to decide strategic direction of where we're headed and trying to figure out what the market is and what the regulators are, and dealing with the people inside the company and dealing with people outside the company and it's juggling a million little pieces. I said I like to build things or invent things. It's not just software, it's companies. A company is a complex thing and it's made up of people, which are the most complex thing we know. It's just fascinating how all the pieces work together. And so I'm involved in all that stuff. So my day job's kind of taking up some of my time.
So at the root of your passion, is it building or is it learning or is it teaching? Like what's at the core of it?
Yes. Yeah. So it's all of those. And in a lot of ways, it's sort of art as well. It's building a company that is done the right way is really an artistic thing, or building software that's done the right way, or solving math problems. Any mathematician would tell you that finding math proofs is an art, is not just an art, but is driven by aesthetics. You're trying to find the most beautiful, most elegant solution. And so, yeah, I am interested in learning, I am interested in teaching, and I'm interested in building and inventing. And I don't even see a way to separate them. And I'm interested in the aesthetics and the art of it all. And I don't think that those are separate pieces. At least for me, I don't see how to separate them as different things. It's one thing, and I like that thing.
It is a very cool thing. So I believe you mentioned building a company the right way, or solving an algorithm, or writing an algorithm the right way. Like, what exactly is the right way?
Yeah, that's always the question. And in math, this is always the thing they talk about. What is the elegant way of doing it? The underlying fundamental thing. When I'm building something, I try to design it so that it'll have all the properties you want. So if it's software, it needs to be fast. If it's a company, it needs to work well. And you come up with an idea of how to architect it all and how to do it all. Don't stop there. That was a bad idea, guaranteed. What you do is you go back to the drawing board and you say, well, is there another way of doing it? And then you look for a different way of doing it. Hey, that one is actually slightly faster. Oh, but it's less secure. Well, is there another way of doing it? That makes the company get things done faster, but makes worse decisions. And so what you do is you keep looking at it from every possible angle, and you keep turning it over in your mind, and you come up with an answer, and then you sleep on it. And the next day you look at it other ways, and you look at other implications of it. And if we follow this business model that we're talking about right now, that actually will work really well for a year. But you know what? I see a year and a half from now, there is actually a problem we could have. Why don't we do this? It's a slightly different thing. Then that works for the next year, and it will be working a year from half from now. For the architecture of something, you say, well, this will work really well, but is it going to be maintainable? What if I want to change in the future? Will it still work well? Is it the elegant, right way of doing it, or is it sort of this ugly, hacky way of doing it? There is this idea that I think is understood by everyone, and no one knows how to put into words, but there's kind of the best way of doing it, the best way to design it, to build it, to understand it, to create it. And it's all about trying to look at many different ways until you figure out what really was the right way to do it. What's the best way?
Do you think there's ever like like a final best way, like something's finished, or can it always be iterated upon and improved and done better?
Well, there probably is a best way to do it, but mere humans never find it. So it's asymptotic. You're always trying to get better and better. And then sometimes you discover, you know what? We could actually be better, just scrap this whole thing and do it a totally different way. But then you have to watch out. The perfect is the enemy of the good, right? The best thing to do right now may be to make a fast decision given the information I have and execute on it. Because if I wait until I have all the information, I will wait forever. You will never do anything. And so it's constantly trying to figure out what is the best way for me to be going right now, which may be to accept bad, hacky things because that's the right thing to do. You just need to do it the bad, hacky way. That's the appropriate thing right now. That's the best way to be managing what I'm doing right now. So it's sort of a meta best way is to not do it the best way.
So when you're going about making this decision, is there like a decision flow or a process, a specific process that you use to like evaluate the decision, choose the best one, and then move on? But well, I think even before that, you have to identify what you actually need to make a decision about. Is there like a flow that you follow, or do you just kind of let your mind guide you where you think you need to go?
Yeah, it's sort of both. It's a lot of playing with ideas. It's play in a lot of ways. Like what a child does with the toys is what you're doing. Because again, what you're doing is trying to look at it from every direction. Now, there are general principles that you can say. You need to be looking at what is it that I'm actually trying to accomplish. Don't just build something because it's cool to build it. You always have a goal, and everything should be directed towards that goal. There's a general principle of try to understand everything before you go do something. There's a limit to how much time you have. Do the appropriate amount for that time, but to the extent that you can afford to do it, find out everything you can. There are things of once you get an answer, don't take that as the answer. Look at problems with it. Think about it as much as you can to see what the flaws are in it. It is also the case that two heads is better than one. If you look at my publication record, most of my papers are co-authored with other people. I like to work with other people. I think it is more fun, and I think you get a better result because everyone sees things the other person doesn't see. Everybody's coming from a different point of view. Everybody will have different insights. And the most interesting part about building a company is trying to find just the right people and get them to work together and have a team that is good. If you have a team that is good, everything else works out. You'll get the right business model, you'll get the right technology, you'll get all of the stuff. It all comes down to the team you put together. And so a big part of problem solving is don't do it alone. You want to get the team. You want to get it right.
So when you are like when you wake up in the morning and you do your thing, like what does that actually look like? What does your day-to-day actually look like?
I do a lot of different things throughout the day. So I have endless meetings. Yeah, that's fun. But sometimes that's necessary. And I sit down and we design architecture for what is our system going to look like in the long term and in the near term. And I spend time just thinking, what are the problems that we're not thinking about right now? What are the problems that could reach us in our business and in our software and in our design and in the personnel within our company? What are the things, some of the problems that we might have? I try to figure out what is it I need to go out and find out about and then go find out about it. You're constantly learning. I mean, it's all about learning continuously. So during my day, I'm doing those things. I get to have fun things like this conversation with you right now. I do that sometimes. I get to write a lot. Being a good writer is absolutely necessary in almost every field, I think. On really rare occasions, I even get to sling code, and I actually get to write programs sometimes. That's pretty rare these days, but I sometimes get to do that. And that's fun. And I say, wow, it's been years since I've done this. This is really fun. What else do I do during the day? I eat when I can. I try to make sure that I am eating, but I don't usually take time to eat. I usually do that while I'm doing other things. I don't know what else I do.
So I'm curious about, and I actually want to step back a second and talk about like the decision making process a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, whenever you've made a decision
Yes.
and that takes you down a certain path, a lot of people, at least from my observations of humanity, which are limited, um, but a lot of people will attach themselves and their identities to a decision that they make,
Hmm.
and then when there's more data that comes through, it may disprove some piece of this thing that we're holding, but we're attached to it, so it's challenging ourselves, and we don't really want to do that. So how do you make sure that you're able to put yourself, your full force into a project, into something that you're building and creating, but at the same time staying maybe detached is the right word enough, or objective enough to where when you find new data and new information that you can course correct, or at least change the beliefs surrounding this thing that you're building?
Okay, so this is a huge problem in human nature, and you have to constantly be fighting against it. There's getting attached to your own ideas, which is a stupid thing to do. You should be constantly looking for what is the right idea. And if the right idea is not the one that I just spent enormous time on, great, you've learned a lesson. Move to the other new idea. There's the sunk cost fallacy. I paid a lot for that. I need to keep paying. No, forget what you've paid already. The question is, from this point forward, what's the cost benefit analysis? And if it's going to cost you more than it's worth, abandon your bad investment and just move on. So you're talking about basically a sunk cost fallacy for time. It's true for that as well. You've got to avoid that. How do you avoid it? First of all, you have to be constantly asking the question, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? Should we switch to something else? Is there something that could go wrong? Is there something that is better? And I am constantly asking this question. You have to be doing that constantly. That helps. Secondly, you need to be constantly thinking about the goal. The goal is we want to solve this ultimate problem. The goal is not shine up this nice shiny thing that I made so everyone will think I made a nice shiny thing. That's dumb. Don't do that. Your goal is not to make everyone think that you're a great person because you created a cool thing. Your goal is to actually solve the problem. And if solving the problem means abandoning what you started, then you abandon what you started. And you've got to constantly be thinking about cost and benefits. It may be that there is another path that's better, but at this point, you can finish up this one faster, and it's enough faster that it makes up for the fact that it's not quite as good as that other path. And wow, I wish I thought of that a month ago, but it is what it is. The right answer right now is to continue on this bad path, and that sometimes is the right answer. And so you're constantly trying to say, what is the best possible path from here? Forget how I got here. What is the best possible path from here? That's what you need to be doing. And it is human nature to not do that. And I can't claim I always do that, but I do say that I put a lot of effort into doing that. I really have as a high priority not to be attached to my baby. You don't ever want to be attached to your idea. And the same thing is true in meetings. When we're trying to figure out how to solve a problem, and I say, oh, I know how we could do it. We could do it this way. Okay, you have got to not attach yourself to that idea. You have got to be truly listening to everyone else. And I abandon it in a second when I hear someone else say another answer. And often that happens. Two heads are better than one. And often I say, wow, you're right. I was wrong. Your idea is better. Let's go with that one. So you've got to do that. It's really important to do that.
So what if you have, in that scenario, let's say there are two ideas, right? We have the team together, we're brainstorming, and there are two ideas here and almost two competing forces, but both sides think they're right. Like, how do you go about that process of, do you test them both? Do you flip a coin, rock, paper, scissors? Like, how do you resolve that and move forward?
So you want to collect as much information as you can afford the time to collect. If you can afford to go do experiments and say, well, there's two little things, why don't we implement a little bit as a rough version of both of them and try them both? We want to know which market to go to. Why don't we try selling in two different markets and see where we get traction? If you can afford, then yes, you should do such things. Guess what? In the real world, often there's no way you can afford to do that. We have to make a decision. And we cannot wait another week. Well, we actually have to do it right now. We just don't have time to wait another week. That's the case. If that's the case, then here's what you do. You make a decision. Okay, that's what you do. And so you take the information you have, you take the intuition you have, you ask the people that are talking to you as many questions as you can to truly see, draw out of them all the pros and cons that they're thinking about and what they're saying, make their case. And then you have to make a decision. And people understand that. You say, okay, we're going to go with A, not B. And I know there were arguments for both A and B, and we are missing a lot of information. B may be better. We have to make a decision now. We're going to go with A. And you make the decision. And then most people understand that. They understand you have to make a decision. And, I was fighting for B. I still think B is better than A, but we have to do something. I'm going to just go ahead and support the team and do A. That's what people will say. And that's the right answer. And if new information comes to light, let me know. And if it turns out that B is better than A, and we discover this at a point in time where switching has better benefits than costs, then I'll switch to B. I don't care that I made the wrong decision. I mean, I don't want to have my ego involved in that. I want to do the right thing. I want to do the best thing. But it's very likely that you eventually discover B was a better path. But at this late date, we're better off sticking with A. It would cost more than it would benefit us to switch. Yeah, then we stick with A. You just have to do that. There's no other way of doing it. But you don't want your ego caught in these things. You don't want your identity caught up in these things. Someone was asking me recently, is your identity in your work? Because I know you work 24 hours a day and you even dream about this stuff. And I said, no, actually my identity is not in my work. I'm doing this work because I believe in what we're trying to accomplish, and I think it's fun, and I think it's worthwhile, and I think it is of value to humanity. But it isn't who I am. And so just keep that in mind. Keep perspective in all this stuff.
I think this is a really interesting time to talk more about who you are as a person. And specifically, I want to talk about this idea of personal development and working on yourself, improving yourself. It seems like throughout your career, you've had a lot of incredible accomplishments. Have you been working on yourself during that? Is that something that you think about? Like, how does that play into your narrative?
Oh, I think about that all the time. So if you're not constantly learning and growing, I mean, you're dead. I can't imagine anything worse than that. I am constantly trying to learn more about the world, reading about the world, building my skills, learning about new kinds of things. I'm also constantly looking at how I am doing things. I am constantly saying, is there a way I could change just, how I deal with email, how I deal with voicemail, how I deal with Slack? I hate Slack, but we have to use it. I mean, in our company, we actually rely on Slack for a lot of things. But am I doing it in a way that I could do in a better way, that I could do it more efficiently? How do I manage my diet? How do I manage my exercise? How do I manage my sleep schedule? How do I balance things? And would it be better to tweak a little bit right now? And I'm constantly looking at that. And I do experiments. And I do tweak it. And I see what the results were. And I measure lots of stuff just because I like science. I measure stuff and see, did the tweak help or did it hurt? And then I learn from that. I'm constantly trying to figure out, is there ways of doing things better? And I ask advice from other people and I get feedback from other people. My brother talked about someone he met who was in college, and she said, wow, I just can't wait to graduate so I can stop learning. And his reaction was, you know what? She probably will.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately, needless to say, that's not only not conducive to success, it's not conducive to being the kind of person you would want to be. If I live to 98, I would really hope that I am still learning at 98, and I'm growing at 98, and I am developing new habits, and not just learning about the world, but learning about myself and about how to do things better at 98. I would hate to not be like that. I don't know. I think that's just important.
So on your journey thus far, what have been the most important things that you have learned about yourself?
I don't know. I guess I learned what I'm good at and bad at, and better ways of organizing my life. Probably I'm better at 53 than I was at 23 at a lot of these things. You learn from your mistakes and make different mistakes in the future, which is better. So probably some of those things are true. Yeah, I guess I introspect a lot. So I've been kind of watching myself on this journey. I have learned a lot about life, I'd say, like the importance of other people, the importance of people close to you that can support you and that can give you advice, that can just, be praying for you when you have problems. There's just having people around you that are close friends and family is just really important. I don't know. I've learned a lot of things, I guess.
What are some of those other life lessons that you have picked up along the way?
The success stuff is not important. I've never really thought it was terribly important. And even more so over time, I've come to think that it's not important. That having awards and rank, having successes in your companies, having money, all those things are probably not very important in the grand scheme of things. What other people think about you is just not all that important in the grand scheme of things. These are things that as human beings, we all naturally want. And okay, that's normal. You don't want pain, you want comfort. But in the grand scheme of things, those really don't matter. So yeah, I guess I've learned some of those things. I don't know. I think it's important to kind of mentor other people, and I try to do that as much as I can. I think that that's important to try to teach them, but I've never, given them the 7 keys to success in life. I think that it doesn't really boil down to that kind of thing. But I give them advice on a lot of things, part of which is, well, go get advice on a lot of things. And so that's some of the best advice, is to go get advice. Yeah.
What are some of the things you mentioned? Some of the things that were not important. Yeah. What are more of the things? Because I believe you mentioned relationships and having people around you can give you advice. What are some of the other things that are truly important, or have at least been the most important for you thus far?
So things that I think are important are not just the people around me that are helping me, but the welfare of other people. So I do think that it is very important to be taking care of other people, and not just because that may help you in some indirect way, but because other people are important. I mean, just inherently, there's an inherent dignity to humanity. I said that it's important to have people praying for you, and I think it's important to be praying and to have a good relationship there. And that's not a relationship with a person, but I think it's an important relationship. I think that it is important to spend your time on things that are useful to the world. And just watching TV or something is not as useful. It is not contributing as much to the world as you could be contributing. Obviously, using time wisely is important because you only get so much. And there's a limit to what you can do in your lifetime. Plus, you never know what that lifespan is. And you don't want to waste your time. I just see that as a horrible thing, to waste time. It is good not to stress over things that you shouldn't be stressing over. So don't stress over them. I don't know. Those are some of the things I guess I've learned.
And what questions do you still have about yourself?
How much can I learn? How much can I learn to do? What kinds of skills can I build? What are the limits of what I can do? I don't know. When you go through very stressful situations, then you learn more about, well, I can handle that stress. So I guess over time, as you have different problems in life, you learn more about how you would handle those problems. I can imagine lots of horrible things that happen to people that haven't happened to me yet, and may very well happen. And I would learn about how I can handle those. Maybe that would also draw me closer to the Lord and draw me closer to family and to friends and to a support network. I don't know. Lots of things to learn.
Do you think that there is any specific way to push the outer limits of, because it seems like the core of what you're saying there was potential, what is our potential, or what is my potential? Is there do you have a certain theory on how to best reach that potential and push that outer limit?
Oh yeah. So the reason I don't know it is you never know it until you get to the end, and then you maybe still could have done it more. But how do you figure out your potential? So first of all, you should know the things you're good at. Well, there's no way to know the things you're good at until you've tried everything. So try lots of things. I mean, how else would you know? Try to learn lots of things, try to do lots of things, try to have lots of different skills, try to put yourself in situations where you're stretched in lots of different ways. I don't know how else you would know that what you're good at. And then as you start to notice things like, I seem to have some abilities in teaching and research. You want to know what you're good at, but you also want to know what is fun. What really gives you joy? When do you really get excited? So I've watched myself. When do I find myself getting really excited? I find myself getting really excited when I am inventing things and doing research, and when I'm teaching other people stuff. Teaching and research is what gets me really excited. So, when I'm in a classroom or on a stage or teaching people within the company, you ask what I do all day. There is a lot of teaching in entrepreneurship. You're doing it all the time. And there's a lot of teaching in what I'm doing right now, where we're just this bunch of technological stuff that's complicated. I'm constantly teaching people in the company and outside of the company about what it all means and how it all works together. So find out what really brings you joy. And I had someone in an interview like this once ask me something, and I said, one of the keys to success is figuring out a way to be passionate about what you're doing. And he had a negative reaction. He said, no, don't tell people to pursue their passions. And I said, you know what? I didn't say that. I didn't say pursue your passion. I said, figure out a way to be passionate about what you're doing. That's different. Part of it may be, yes, if something looks like inherently the most boring thing in the world to you, maybe you shouldn't do that as a profession. To the extent you can, yeah, it's nice to go in directions you're more passionate about than ones that you aren't. But everything has its downsides. And maybe you're really passionate about something the world really doesn't need another person doing that right now. And so maybe that really isn't a good profession to go into. But whatever you end up doing, even if it's something you hate, then you should also be trying to become passionate about it. And I think that there is a degree to which whatever situation you're in, you can start to become passionate about doing it and get excited about it. And that's a key maybe to success, certainly, but also key just to having a better life. Isn't it better to do stuff that's fun than stuff that's not fun? Well, then to the degree you can change what you do, then do something different. And to the degree that you don't, then make something you're doing fun. So to the extent you can, those are good ideas. And then sometimes you can't. Oh, well.
What's your dark side?
My dark side. Ugh. I don't even know what. So everybody has tendencies to want to do bad things, and it's just always a struggle. And so, you try not to do that. Everyone has a tendency when you're tired to just kind of snap back at people and be rude and unkind. Don't do that. Everyone has a tendency to be selfish and to care about, what's good for you. Well, don't do that. It's a constant battle. So my dark side is the dark side of every human being. And it's a constant struggle. No one is just naturally good. It's just a constant battle to do it. And it's worth fighting that battle.
So when you look ahead 5, 10, 15,000 years from now, like a long time for the life of a human being, but definitely not that long in the greater scheme of time, whatever that actually may mean. What do you want people to remember you for? Like, what do you want to leave behind as your legacy?
It's an interesting question, and I've thought about that before. I think I care less about that now. I think as I get wiser, I care less about such things. But what I would like people to think is that I actually did contribute something to the world, and that I was a loving person to other people, and that I helped them, that I invented and then built companies around things that actually made the world a better place, that I was working on things that were significant, not wasting my time, and that those significant things were of benefit to the world and were things worth doing. That's what I would want. And actually, whether they remember me or not, or are aware of it or not, I don't care. I think the right question to ask is 15,000 years from now, what will you want it to have been that you did, as opposed to what will you want people to have remembered you doing? And I think maybe that's the more important question. So that's the one I try to answer.
I agree with you. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. It's a way better question.
Your question was great. Didn't mean to criticize.
No, but I loved your question. I'm seriously, yeah. Thank you. one thing I thought was interesting was when you're answering that, you were saying as you get wiser.
Hmm.
So what does wisdom actually mean to you?
Oh, I think the word means knowing what to do in every situation, as opposed to just knowledge, which is knowing the proof of P equals NP or whatever. So wisdom is knowing what to do. And I, as far as I can tell, know more of what to do in various situations at 53 than I did at 43. And I knew more at 43 than at 33, and more than that than 23, and more than that than 13. And when I was a 3-year-old, I probably didn't know a lot about what to do in every situation. I would oddly say that I think I've enjoyed each decade more than the previous one as well. Those two may be correlated. I don't know. But it's better to know what to do. And I have a long ways to go. So hopefully when I'm 63, I'll know a lot more than I do now about what to do in every situation.
So I want to thank you very, very much. Um, Leemon, it's truly been an honor and a pleasure to get to speak with you today. I want to be very respectful of your time. So I do have one more question for you, and then we'll wrap it on up. But what question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
Interesting. It would be depending on what kinds of things you're interested in and that your audience are interested in. So you've asked sort of the fundamental questions about who I am, how I got here, sort of how to do business. And I guess I would be interested in what is it that you're interested in that you haven't asked about. I've mentioned a lot of subjects. And so if I were you, I would ask maybe about the question, the subject that I mentioned that you're most interested in. And my perception is that you've been doing that. So I mentioned a whole bunch of subjects. You could only had time to ask about, a tenth of them, and you did. So I hope that you did the right ones. I hope you did ask the ones that you really were interested in. So that's it.
Well, I was definitely trying to ask the things I was interested in, and I feel like I'm very grateful that you're gracious enough to answer this question. So,
my pleasure.
So thank you very much, and again, Leemon, I just want to express my gratitude for this time that we've been able to share. It's been very special for me. So thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I appreciate you talking with me.
Me too. And I want to thank you and thank everybody who's watching and listening. Y'all rock. So thank you, everybody, and I will see you all on the next episode. Take care.